Okay, we see people jumping in. Hello, hello. Welcome. As we're waiting for the room to get fuller, I always like to ask people to tell us where they're watching us from, so feel free to put that in the chat. Ah, cool, we have one. Felix is from Berlin. Hello, Felix. How's the weather there? Very cold. No, it's getting better now. Snowy. Nice. Hi, Pierre. Nice to see you. I'm glad you joined us. Awesome. No, I can't see you, but nice to see you here.
Yep, starting to see some familiar names in attendance, which is great.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello. Just a little bit. I see people keep coming in. We're just letting them join. Hi, from Florida, from Prague. Hi, from Brazil. Nice. Awesome. Yes, we are recording this and we will share the recording with you at the end so you can consult and share with others. We'll have a lot of information, I would say, in a good way.
And just as a note, as people are typing into the chat here, if you do have any questions along the way, feel free to type them into the chat and I'll kind of monitor in the background and provide some answers. So feel free to stay active in the chat during the presentation.
Great. Do you think we can start then?
Yeah, I'd say let's go ahead and kick off.
Awesome. So introductions first. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. It is our first webinar of the year, but I can tell you we have a lot of stuff prepared and on the pipeline for you. So we're going to have much more. And I am Beatriz, a solutions architect from Supernova, obviously. And I have Taylor, our head of sales and customer success, with me today.
Hey, everybody.
Awesome. And today we're going to cover three key Supernova features that we have been seeing forward-thinking teams adopt in their workflows. And we see that this makes their design system widely adopted and a very important pillar of its success. And all of this is going to be rooted on and focused on adopting AI-powered workflows, which is a very hot topic at the moment. So me and Taylor talk to many teams on a daily basis, and there is no doubt that we see that product development workflows have changed. And this is all thanks to the advancements in AI. We see a very big trend where teams want to adopt AI technologies, but some have not been able to do so, or at least not in a standardized way, or even figured out how to do that. And this is where Supernova meets you. And as if you have likely noticed from last year, Supernova has expanded to serve the wider product team, not only the design system team, but we always make sure that the design systems is always at the core of what we do because it's awesome and very important. And by talking to the multiple product teams across many verticals and also both design system management teams and normal product teams, we see a bunch of trends happening at the moment. And I'm going to summarize really quickly the top three that illustrate very well why our product is useful for you. The number one is that we see that the boundaries between the roles have been blurred. And this is now because designers can produce code and PMs and engineers can produce designs, and this causes some friction. We see a strong push for the teams to adopt AI, but we also see that there are multiple drop-off points as they are adopting AI. And what this means is that each team member tends to use their own AI-powered tool in silo, and this does not allow for the collaboration and the reuse of the output that is being created with the AI. And lastly, we also see that there is a very, very big push for adopting AI. And this has more rapidly surfaced the gaps in the architecture of the company's systems and also surfaces the misalignment that there is between what is in the designs and what is in production. But the summary of all of these trends essentially is that we know that we can produce more and faster with the help of AI, but the bottleneck becomes the quality and the reuse of the output that we produce with it. So this is where Supernova believes, and we believe that the design systems has a place to shine. It can come out of the shadow and play a pivotal role in the implementation of AI-powered workflows, which is awesome. And we believe, and we have seen that there are these design system teams that utilize design systems as a superpower for their AI-powered workflows work more efficiently. And we have identified 3 characteristics that these teams' design system has to have in order for them to manage to have the best AI integrated workflow possible. So the number 1 is that the design system needs to be accessible. And what this means is that it needs to be easy to consume, to be up to date and have the most relevant information, not only for us humans, but also for the machines. The second one is that it needs to be integrated. There needs to be parity between what is in designs and what is implemented in the code. And the third one is, last but not least, one is that we need to make sure that the system is being reused and that it's being used as an input as we adopt these AI tools and as we explore and iterate on our solutions. And of course, Supernova is here to help you operationalize all of these 3 characteristics. Supernova, I'm going to quickly go through the features that we're going to go through during the webinar, but I just want to set the scene for how we can help you make this happen. So we can help you make your design system more accessible through and easier to consume with the help of Ask AI. It is our AI-powered search engine that modernizes how the teams consume the design system information. And we have seen big impacts on adoption and also a big reduction on the overhead of the design systems team need for support. And of course, we didn't forget the machines, and all of the information from your design system is also accessible through Supernova MCP. And this is very powerful to make sure that the AI is actually being used and the code that is being produced with the AI is of quality and up to par to the design system. We help you make your design systems integrated by helping you create a translation layer between your code and designs by using the code automation and the exporters. And this makes your tokens connected as you build components across platforms. And also it makes it easier for you to expand your library, it being because you are a white label design system or because you're going through a redesign or adding other complementary styling options like dark mode, for example. The code exporters make this process much faster. And of course, all of this can be also used through Supernova MCP as your engineers are building the components with agentic IDs. And the last but not least, Supernova helps you make your design system reusable by helping you integrate your own design system knowledge in AI prototyping and prototype with your own code component library, which I will show you in a bit. And so those ideations and explorations and prototypes that the team create doesn't get lost in translation between all of the different tools. And they are much closer to your production code, making them much more useful and reusable when it's time to port them to production. And all of this is in a collaborative environment where designers and product managers and engineers, and we've seen other team members and also users, for that matter, come together and build the features. And all of this is grounded in the design system. And of course, lastly, we haven't forgotten our old friend MCP, which is the underlayer of all of this. it can help you essentially relay the code that you have created with Supernova Create to your production ready code. Great. So enough of the PowerPoint. Let's jump to the fun part, which is seeing these things in action. And I would love to start with Supernova Core, the platform that you're most likely all familiar with. So Supernova Core is the design system management aspect, and you likely have connected your data sources to Supernova, all of your Figma variables and your and your styles in all of your design system elements, as well as you've been working on your documentation website, of course. But we know some of you have not had the chance to hook up the code automation. And I would like to talk a little bit more about the use cases here so that you can think through how you could implement this in your workflow, as well as how or what are the options that you have. So we typically see teams in two scenarios utilizing the code automation pipelines. Either number one, they are starting from scratch, so they can be starting their design system from scratch, or they can be supporting a new framework, for example, so they are building their components. They haven't built their components yet, so this is the perfect opportunity to create the code automations because there is just much less back and forth and human error as your engineers need to create the list of all the tokens themselves. And the second scenario is teams that already have a code base, a functioning code base, but they don't have the connection to what the token architecture or the designs that have been done inside of Figma. And we do see that it's a great promoter to also integrate this option. And this is where the exporter's flexibility comes into play and can help you with that. So if I go here and create a new pipeline, you'll be able to see that they are divided by the types of elements that are possible to be exported in your design system. I will show you an example of the design token. So I'll choose this CSS tokens exporter. And so you have three options essentially in the configuration. This is very straightforward. Designers can do this. We see usually a designer responsible for the token architecture part in conversations at the same time with an engineer to make sure that you are in agreement with your token architecture and the code output that is coming from Supernova. So the first option that you have here is the data. So this is essentially where the information is coming from and what information you want to output into your code repositories. We see teams doing this in multiple ways. It's very flexible. So one of the options that you have is choosing data sets if you are utilizing them. But if not, then you are just simply utilizing modes and you want to output them to either serve different brands or different styles, you can choose them here. But we also see teams creating, for example, a pipeline for each theme. That is also possible. It depends on your setup. But if you see here, I can refresh my preview and the theme that I chose, the Jupyter brand, is going to show here. And I have automatically created all the tokens that are relevant for my engineers to consume to build the components with, or the agents that I'm using as well. So if I go to the configuration tab, this is where the flexibility comes into play and where we advise you to have an engineer present to help you think through these options, because what it comes from Figma cannot directly translate to what they need. So we give you the possibility to edit things like the prefix of these tokens, or for example, if we go here to our typography, Figma tends to work with just fixed values, like utilizing pixels, but we give you automatically the option to use a more relative options. If you want to use an REM, for example, you can automatically have that translation directly from the exporter itself. And these exporters are essentially the scripts that Supernova runs to make this possible and this happen. And you can even take this further and fork and create your own exporter with we can help you with that. So this is even more flexible than all the options that you have here. And the last step is the delivery step, which essentially just means the automation. So it's constituted by two parts. One is the event, which is what is going to trigger this pipeline to run. And the second one is the delivery method, which is where do you want these tokens to be outputted to? Typically, the normal setup we see is teams utilizing the source updated, which is when the teams have their Figma connected and the source of a source of information for their tokens. The source updated is the one that the teams utilize. So anytime there's changes in Figma, the pipeline is triggered and runs. And in the delivery method, you would choose the repository where your code base lives, and you can authenticate and connect. And you would essentially choose the destination folder where you want this to be outputted. And your engineers or your agents, AI agents, can consume these tokens to build the components with. And it's very flexible as well. You can define things like customize the pull request, etc. And so the last bit of the code pipelines that I just want to show you is how this would look in practice for your engineers, or what is the other side of the pipeline manager that we are seeing here. And essentially what Supernova outputs is the pull request that you have set up to your code base, and this is what your engineers would receive. They would be notified that there were some changes. They don't need to come to GitHub. They can be already in their code IDE and pull this information and view what has changed and what hasn't. Make sure that there aren't any breaking changes, accept the changes, and then merge this pull request to the branch that they're working. So this is very fast and straightforward.
Awesome. Yeah, and I wanted to provide some color to this because one trend that we've seen across most of our really successful customers that are getting the most out of Supernova is the use of these pipelines and exporters. And I want to give a customer example. So we have one of our most beloved customers is based in France, and I was moderating a panel with them last year, and they talked a lot about what life was like before Supernova and after Supernova, particularly as it pertains to these exporters. And they gave an example, like a real life example, where the design systems team need to make what we would consider a pretty menial change to the design system. I think they were updating like 3 color tokens. And what they were saying is that the process to actually get those 3 color tokens updated in the code base and repo was 6 weeks and 2 engineering sprints. And you can likely imagine how that happens, that the design systems teams makes a change, they submit a ticket to the engineering team. It's rarely going to be the number one top priority as soon as it comes in to complete. So it may take, a week or two for them to look at it. Maybe they implement something, but it doesn't go through the way the design system team wanted. So you go back through that flow. And then finally, 6 weeks later, this small change to the design system is actually reflected in code. And now they live in a world where they can make that same change to their tokens. Supernova will pick that up, update those tokens in Supernova. We will then automatically update everywhere those tokens are referenced in your documentation as well, so that those are up to date. And then, depending on how you've set your triggers that Beatrice showed for the pipelines themselves, it may export the code for those 3 updated tokens directly to the engineering team as a pull request. They inspect it, merge it in, and now it's live. So that same change that took them, say, 6 weeks to make in the past, now it takes them, call it 6 minutes, because end to end, that entire process is fully automated. So this is a huge impact point for Supernova. Like, we're a firm believer that the way you use design systems is much more than a documentation site. Yes, that's important, but it's much, much, much more than that. And we'll show you even more later in the webinar. But this is one of the big examples of that is how can we use the design system to automate a lot of these workflows and make things a lot easier when we're collaborating cross team.
For sure. And in the light of expanding your documentation website, I think it's time to go to the accessible, making your design system accessible portion. So I'm jumping into Supernova Portal, which is the platform that we have launched last year. And you probably heard us talking about it, but I want to preface that this platform is the one that is dedicated to your design system consumers. So the people that are going to interact and make decisions and build with the design system that you are creating in your manager. And it has two main portions to it, which we will cover. It has the create and the ask. I'm going to quickly go over the ask functionality, which is essentially enhancing the experience that your users have as they are documenting or consulting, as they are consulting your documentation and building with the elements of your design system. And so this is a AI-powered search engine that is based out of all the elements that we have here once more. So it has all the information that you have connected to your design system and the documentation information that you have as well. And so Ask just aggregates that really quickly, pretty easily. And so as you prompt, it gives you already a search based on the semantic information that the context that the prompt is giving. But I want to show you an actual action and prompt it to answer my question. And this is very similar to what we're now used to in the AI tooling, but it is also an interactive chat. So we build a bunch of dedicated playgrounds that are relevant for the design system consumers. And as you see, it's building the response based out of my design system. But if I scroll up, you see here, it gave me what I asked for it. So all the buttons that I have available. But if I dig in a little deeper as a design systems consumer, I can see here the information relevant to what I asked. This is in particular the representation of this button from Figma. If I was a designer, I can just open it in Figma and utilize it in my project or get more information as I need. But I can also play around with the prompts to get a better feel of what the options that I have or how should I be designing with it, as well as a list of the properties that it has. And of course, we have everything relevant to the elements that you have in your design system. So it also references the documentation pages where it is getting the information from, so that your users can dive deeper into the topics that the AI responds here. It has the code snippets, so they can also be utilized in the projects and much more. Another component to this functionality is that not only that your design system consumers have the option to prompt the AI and ask it, so that it gives them quick responses, but they have the possibility to browse and have a glimpse of all the information that exists in the system, because often we have multiple Figma files within the design system. We have multiple storybook instances as well as components, so they can consult all the information that you have been managing here as a design system manager in your data portion. So all of this information that you are outputting here or importing directly from Figma will automatically translate into the Supernova Ask so that they can access this information. And everything is relevant to the elements that are here. So storybook, we have a dedicated prop table as well as the code. Also tokens, if they want to copy them and utilize them in the project, that is also possible. And this is Ask in a glimpse. I just want to quickly show you from a design system manager perspective, what are the options that you have as well, because you can heavily customize how you want the AI to respond to your users. And this would be back in Supernova Core. If we go back again, if you go to the settings, you have the options here. So you can define, have a lot of flexibility. You can define what you want to be surfaced, and what knowledge you want the LLM to base itself out of as it is tailoring these responses. And you can also tweak the source prompt to your preferences and to what makes sense for your business. And lastly, you have here this data governance option, which is essentially gives you the answers and the questions that your team has been having in an anonymized way that you can just make decisions out of this as you are enhancing the Ask AI experience for your design system consumers.
Yeah, and touching on this page in particular, some of the interesting use cases we've seen. So, like in the custom instructions, I know a lot of our customers are international and have consumers of the design system that operate in different languages. So we've tested it out for, if asked in Spanish, respond in Spanish or really any other language. So there's some cool use cases there. And then also on the data governance, so being able to export all of the questions and answers that anyone has asked the AI. A lot of companies are starting to mine that data and find those trends. So, a lot of people will say, we want a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of response engine on the different pages, and customers will find a way to import that into their documentation site. But what we found is this is a much better way of getting that data because it doesn't rely on users opting into providing that feedback. You're basically getting the behind the scenes look of what they're asking, and maybe, hundreds of people are asking about the same component that doesn't make sense to them, which then tells the design system team that maybe we need to make some adjustments or document this better or whatever it may be. And then high level here, the Ask AI is one of my favorite new features that we've launched because I think it has particularly increased adoption of design systems tremendously for customers that are utilizing it. And I can sympathize with all the design system managers on the call because that's one of the most common themes we hear is that we struggle with adoption, that you put all of your blood, sweat, and tears into creating a perfect design system, but then people aren't referencing it, they're not reading documentation, they're still asking questions directly to the team. And and the end product might not be using the elements that are actually in the design system. So this is really aimed at tackling that exact problem. And if you really think about it, it makes sense that, I've been in the design systems world for the better part of a decade. For anyone that remembers Envision from back in the day, I spent about 5 years at Envision and was part of their design system manager launch 10 years ago. So I've kind of been following for a while how all this has evolved. And what I've noticed is that design systems technology has improved tremendously over the last decade, but the way people consume design systems has not. And it's very much still stuck in what I call a 1990s, maybe early 2000s model of consumption, which is the design system team writes the instruction manual. If you have questions, go read the instruction manual. And the reality is, if you think about your personal life, your work life, that's just not how we operate anymore. We don't operate on the presumption that I'm just going to read the manual to get answers. We expect, and consumers expect, a much more immediate, effective, interactive way of consuming this information. And that's exactly what Ask is intended to do. So, in a lot of ways, it's us pulling how people interact with design systems into 2026, whereas it's been stuck as kind of a decades old model for a very long time. And again, the biggest improvement we've seen is that customers that are actively utilizing this Ask engine see tremendous improvement in people actually adopting the design system, which means that all of the work that you put into creating everything, maintaining it is actually worthwhile and actually has the business impact that we want to see. So next, we're going to talk about our prototyping engine, which is this create button that Beatrice just switched over to. I want to give a little bit of a preamble to this. So the first thing I'll say is I'm sure a lot of people on this call have tried out or at least heard of other prototype AI prototyping tools like Lovable, Figma Make, V0, Builder. It seems like there's another one popping up on the market every other week. So it's a very hot space. But we're approaching this from a slightly different way than a lot of the competition. And I think it can really boil down into three main themes. The first is native design system access, that part of creating a really good prototype is trying to make it look as much like the end product as we possibly can. So our ability and native access to all of the design system information allows us to pull your tokens directly into the prototypes. We'll talk a little bit about pulling in your code components in a little bit. We'll soon be referencing all of your documentation to inform the prototype in terms of how we actually build. So the end result is a much more high fidelity and true to life prototype than you'd expect from other tools. Second is collaboration, that a lot of the prototyping tools that we see on the market are aimed at a certain persona or a certain particular workflow, meaning that you have your prototyping tool for designers, and you have your prototyping tool for engineers, and you have your prototyping tool for PMs. But the problem is that there hasn't been a good way to cross collaborate across all of these teams within a single tool. And naturally, everyone that's part of especially a big business, that's just not how things work. Nothing happens in a silo. You're always getting feedback from your design team and your engineers and your PM and leadership, etc. And if we don't provide an easy way for all of those different personas to interact with the prototype, provide feedback, iterate, then it's kind of a broken workflow. And we go into the mode of kind of rebuilding things all the time from different viewpoints. And our tool is kind of aimed at bringing all of those people together to one place to collaborate on this particular prototype. And then the third thing that I think is, in my opinion, the coolest differentiator is our integration with custom code components. So the idea is, even if you can get a really high fidelity prototype that maybe uses your Figma components and it looks really good, the underlying code typically is not the code that an engineer would use in production. So it creates this obvious gap where, yes, the prototype looks great, but we have to try to strip out as much of that context, screenshots, Figma files, etc., provide it to the developer, and they basically rebuild it from scratch in the repo. And with our custom code components, first of all, because it will use your real components, it improves even more the fidelity and how realistic the prototype is. But in my opinion, even more importantly, once that prototype's done, you can stream it from our MCP server to really any IDE that is AI empowered, so Cursor, Copilot, etc. And the real code for your actual components will show up there, meaning that the developer has very little lift on them to ship it to production. It's a matter of, kind of tweaking things versus rebuilding it in the repo. And I think that is the biggest gap that we're seeing. And the long-term vision for this is, a lot of companies are testing out these prototyping tools, and I feel like most companies haven't fully figured out where it fits into the workflow and how it works. But the most common workflow I'm seeing is someone, so say a designer or a PM, will have an idea. They'll go to one of these prototyping tools, start prototyping, iterating, build the prototype. Once the prototype is done and quote unquote approved, they'll take as much context as they can. Again, a lot of times it's as little context as screenshots. They'll send it to the design team. The design team then takes that information and basically rebuilds it from scratch in Figma. So now they'll iterate on that. It gets built in Figma. Great. Now we have the prototype in Figma. Then the same thing happens again, which is we try to get as much context as possible out of it. We then provide that to the developer. They again build it from scratch in the repo. So you're essentially building the same thing three different times at three different stages in three different tools from three different personas. But I think everyone on the call can easily see how inefficient that workflow is. So our kind of long-term goal here is to create a workflow where you can easily go between these personas, between these tools, pass information back and forth, and not lose any of that context so that the end game is it lands in Cursor, Copilot, whatever you use, and it's almost ready for production or maybe even ready for production at that stage. And I think that is probably the single biggest differentiator because there's no other product on the market that I'm aware of that allows you to pull your code components in that way. And I think that's the kind of golden ticket in terms of how do we use prototyping and how do we do it in a way that's seamless across all of these people and at different stages in the process. So I will hop off my soapbox and pass it back to Beatrice to show you how it actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to prototype together here an iteration of a feature we have released last week. So we're going to prototype on top of Supernova's actual design system. And so last week we it enabled you the option to share the prototypes with the public. You can either share them with a password login to your own design system workspace members, or you can share it with a public with like an open URL. But it does not yet have the option to restrict, like password protect this URL, and this is what we're going to explore here. And so I want to show you this project context dropdown, which is very important for what we're going to cover here. And I'm going to choose Supernova Sandbox, which is where our design system lives. And I'm going to kick off the prototype because this is going to take a little bit, as we know AI isn't super fast yet. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about the feature itself. And so as it is processing, this is essentially the prototype window. It's very familiar. So we now have here on the left side the build with AI, where you can both chat with AI, ask it to prototype, and also chat with your team members. I'll cover a little bit more about the collaboration aspect in a bit. And on the right side is where the results are happening. But in light of what Taylor was sharing, which is very important, we don't want you to prototype in silo and not make use of these awesome things that you are exploring. And I want to call your attention to this section, which is the projects. And this is a very important aspect to Supernova. And so we believe that you can think of products, as kind of epics or themes of what you are exploring in terms of a feature. And I'm going to show you here a sample project, and this is what you would see in the overview page and how we see teams collaborating together with these prototypes, and you will have an idea of how you can apply this to, or your design system consumers can or your team members can do. And so the first part is the overview, which gives you a very transparent way, a glimpse into who is doing what in the project, who is prototyping what, and what is happening. You can see here on the left side that we have the concept of prototypes and plural, because this shared project context can be created and can be prototyped with across multiple prototypes within one project. And if we jump in here to this one, which is very similar to the one we're prototyping here, I just want to show you, give you a glimpse whilst it's working of what we're building here. So you have the collaboration aspect in the chat that we saw in our iteration, but you can see the result here on the right side, a very familiar button to the one we have in the Supernova interface. And as you can see, it is using our own code components that we have in Supernova and creating the iteration based out of that. And it created what I asked because I have tested this prompt before, and just gave me a result of essentially based out of my design system. And the awesome part about Supernova portal is that everything is integrated. So if I click here, Command K, for example, I can, as a design system consumer, get a little bit more knowledge about my system and just get a better glimpse of all the things that I have as I am building with Supernova, and I can even ask AI to give me the information I need if I have any questions. And so if we look here at the code, for example, you can see that it is using DM button neutral from Supernova/DM, which DM is dark matter, which is our design system. And you can see here that the output, like Taylor said, it's extremely close to what we would have in production. And for me as a designer, this is a very I have a designer background, and this is a very interesting way of working because I think it's a paradigm shift from what we're used to, exactly what Taylor was saying about the different drop-off points as we are developing features. This is somewhat a dream come true in a way, because I remember as we were every time we design, we have the Figma window open and we have our live app in production. And so what tends happening is that as we try as hard as we can to make Figma the source of truth of our designs, but in reality, it's actually the code and what is in production that is the truth. And essentially now, because we can design with our own code, we can actually make things much closer to production and do a lot of explorations. I'll also drop off of my soapbox, but I will also just point a little some other things. Let's just see if our prototype has finished. If the output that it is still processing. No, it has finished. So this was the prototype that we kicked off. You can see by the time, and let's see the result it outputted. Okay, not as beautiful as the other one, but still using my design systems, and I can iterate, and you can see this is using essentially all of our components. And of course, the other prototype I iterated multiple times, but this one is just the beginning, a kickoff, and it's great. It's offering me a lot of possibilities. And as you can see, it's also based out of our own share model that doesn't have the login option. But since we have this open, I'll show you these possibilities. So you can publish this prototype to the public. You can share it with your users so you can get some feedback in real time with your teammates. That's also very useful. Some other things you can do with Supernova is within the projects themselves, you can create complementary documentation that enhances what you are building here. So if we go back to our example project, I have here an example of an MVP that was based out of a prototype that we created, because in Supernova projects, everything is connected. So you can reference pieces between each other, and AI will help you be much faster into documenting and keeping this documentation up to date. And I even am referencing the prototype right here so that the team can consult it, because it's an available URL. So this is also a cool way of utilizing Supernova in your workflows. And all of this, I want to show what is powering this context for the project that we are looking into here, and the same one as we created in the beginning. If I go to my project settings, you will see here that I have the knowledge base, which is Supernova Sandbox, and it's based out of dark matter design system. And this is something you can set up as a design system manager. So if we go back to Supernova Core, so I'm back to Supernova Core here on the settings under shared contexts. This is where you can create unlimited contexts for multiple projects. And I want to explain you a little bit more of the workflows that we are seeing the teams do. So typically we see teams setting up at least two types of project shared contexts. One is not tied necessarily to the design system, and it's made for exploration and ideation processes. And the other one is tied to the design system, where if the team wants to essentially create more realistic and production-ready results, they can utilize that shared context. And so I'm going to show you what this means in practice and how can you set up this for your system. So the first option you have is defining the data you want the AI to base itself out of. So I have multiple design systems, so that's why I have this option. If you are leveraging data sets you will have the option to select them here as well. So you can create, if you have multiple data sets, multiple shared contexts per data set, for example. And as you see here, it shows us the available content. So for one, it has the design tokens, and second, the design system documentation. The design tokens I will touch in a bit, but the design system documentation is just the standard expected knowledge base of your documentation, so that when you it enriches the output of the AI. Now, moving down to the component set. So this is essentially the second option that you have, which is what will or how will your AI build your components or the prototypes, pardon, how will the AI build the prototypes? And this is based out of two options. The number one is utilizing ShadCN UI. This is the default library that we utilize. And this is where you can even make it closer, looking closer to your design system. And this is where you can create, for example, a project context that is, like I said, close to your design system if you want that, or you want to do something more wireframey type of connection, you can do that so that you can just have like something on paper and do some explorations. But if you want to connect it to your design system, you have the option, or make it closer, looking closer to your design system, you have the option to choose from your design tokens and map them to the ShadCN library so that they look exactly like your brand. But as we know, each business has its own necessities, and not all components look the same. Not all components look like ShadCN. And this is where the second option comes into play, which is the option to use your own code component library. And as you can see here, I have dark matter, which was the one we were utilizing in our projects. You can upload it to Supernova via our developer toolkit, which we have a CLI. It's a very straightforward process. You can get more information here if you are a Supernova admin, and we can also help you with that. And Taylor will get into that a little bit at the end. And the last option you have for your project context is you can add more context and knowledge to the AI. It's always useful for it to give the best results possible. So you can always enhance the AI here. Great. So this is essentially the Supernova prototyping feature at a high level. And when it comes to, as you were going back and forth and doing the whole workflow. And I just wanted to share the last piece of the puzzle, which Taylor mentioned, which is the export piece. So the MCP also plays a part here. And so all of these prototypes that you have done within this project will be available through streaming through the MCP. So our Supernova MCP has a bunch of tools, of which we're running a little bit out of time. I'm just going to show you my cursor real quick. So this is the cursor settings, how it would look like very standard if you had the MCP installed. And so these are the tools that we have available for you. The first ones are pertaining your design system knowledge base and your information. And for example, if you see here, I asked Cursor to give me a list of the tokens I have within my system and all its naming, etc. And because I could have my code exported to here through Supernova exporters, I could tell it to just use those tokens as it is building the components. So this is extremely powerful. Or if you have your MCP streaming, you can ask it to fetch essentially in this case was the popover example, and apply it to your project, and it will just adapt the code. But because it is much closer to your production code, it just has all the context that it needs to make things much faster and less prone to errors. And that is it in a nutshell, I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Beatrice, for walking us through all of that. And I will let you man the chat channel now. I think Felix had a question that he wanted answered. So I want to talk and kind of wrap things up here with kind of high level product strategy and vision moving forward. And the way I view it is, Supernova Core is kind of the center, the sun, if you think about the solar system. And what we're kind of building now is a bunch of tools like Ask AI, like our prototyping engine that orbit your design system. And the real goal here is to make your design system more valuable to the business because all the design system managers on the call, like we're all working towards the same goal, which is how do we create the best design system? But more importantly, how can that design system improve our speed to delivery, our efficiencies, eliminating inaccuracies, consistency, things like that. And the reality is that if people aren't interacting with the design system enough, we can't accomplish the actual goal of having the design system, which is to make these business impacts. So if you look at kind of where we go from here, like Beatrice opened up with this, like design systems is still our heart and soul, but we're now exploring these new ways for more people to use the design system more easily, to get more value out of the design system, to find new creative ways like prototyping to utilize what's already in the design system. And I think that obviously we have many more ideas on where this can go, but that is kind of our North Star and our guiding light is not just how do we create the best documentation site, but how do we make the design system an everyday used part of the business that everyone's touching, using for different purposes, and driving all of those business results that we want to see. So, with that, we will wrap up for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining and taking the time to walk through this. And what I'll say is if you do have any questions and you're one of our enterprise customers, you can reach out to your customer success manager. If you're not an enterprise customer, you can reach out to sales@supernova.io with any questions. And yeah, if you're looking to explore this more, we're happy to connect with you and would love to hear more from you and how we can implement some of these AI-based workflows within your tool set. So yeah, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for joining and for your time. So we won't have fully time to answer all of the questions, but we will answer them post. So feel free to keep them coming. And we also will share the recording with you and the Q&A results so everyone can have access to the questions and answers. Thank you so much and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you.